Hello, everyone. Welcome to the interactive session today. I'm Sauraveshwar Sen, welcoming all of you once more. And right at the onset of the session, on behalf of the entire Catalyst team, pray and wish that everyone back at your end, including your family members, are keeping well and they are safe. To start off the session today, a little bit about Catalyst for everyone's benefit, that at Catalyst since 2011, we have been training, mentoring, and guiding students and working professionals to step up to careers in the social development sector. Over the years, our flagship online training programs, which mostly have now gone online, at least since the onset of the pandemic, they include preparing students from classes 11th and 12th for pursuing bachelor's in the social science programs offered by institutions in India as well as abroad. Preparing mentoring, also undergraduates, graduates, postgraduates, working professionals for master's programs in social sciences offered by similar institutions in India as well as abroad. Supporting students who are looking for MPhil, PhD in the social science domains across the intersectionalities, providing them guidance and mentoring support for networking, for research, as well as giving them training support for exams, including UGC NET, GRE, TOEFL, or IELTS. And also, since the last 5 years, we have been actively helping, guiding, and mentoring students with upskilling for social sector jobs, employment opportunities, as well as fellowships. Every Catalyst alumna over the last 10 years have not only been successful in getting through the opportunities in social science, but they have also been flag bearers of the social change and progress that has been in our society for over the years. And people from the domain are working with the government, with the public and private organizations, educational institutions, CSR policy think tanks, civil society organizations, social enterprises, and many have ventured out on their own to become social entrepreneurs. On that note, I would like to introduce to all of you our speaker for the day, Kanupriya Sharma. And Kanupriya, thank you so much for being with us today and taking out your time, taking out your schedule, I would say, from your very, very busy research work, and to be able to share your perspective with the participants in this very unique interactive session. A little bit about Kanupriya before we pass on the baton to her for the session. Kanupriya completed her undergraduate in psychology honors from Punjab University and a postgraduate diploma in new journalism from Asian College of Journalism, Chennai. After a brief stint as a journalist in 2013, she enrolled for the MA Social Work in Criminology and Justice at the Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai, where she was exposed to the fieldwork across various community and correctional settings. Post her master's degree, Kanupriya worked for more than 3 years in an anti-human trafficking organization conducting rescue operations of children from sex slavery, child labor, and bride trafficking, and providing them with aftercare support. In 2017, she went back to academia to pursue an MPhil in criminological research from the University of Cambridge, UK. The next year, Kanupriya worked as a Chief Minister Fellow with the Delhi government, mainly involved with formulating policies towards ending violence against women. In 2019, she was awarded the prestigious Gates Cambridge Scholarship to pursue a PhD in criminology from the University of Cambridge. Kanupriya, congratulations on that note. Currently, Kanupriya is pursuing her PhD in Cambridge, where she's exploring the intersection of marriage, kinship, and resistance in the lives of women prisoners in India. Her research aims to provide a culturally nuanced understanding of imprisonment through women's intimate relationships inside and outside prison. Apart from this, Kanupriya runs the Decolonizing Criminology Network at Cambridge, which aims to encourage more scholarly criminological research from the non-West. Kanupriya, thank you so much for being with us and again, showing so much support towards creating more clarity about the wide prospect which your research work as well as your subject or your expertise or your proficiency, and one can actually look at it in so many different ways of criminology for all the participants, including me today, right?
Thank you so much for such a generous introduction, Saurav sir. Sarveswar, and I feel really privileged today to have been invited to a platform like Catalyst, because I think these platforms are really required in countries like India, where criminology is still not recognized as a discipline, and where it continues to make its struggle not only in all academic disciplines, but within social sciences as well. So even within social sciences, criminology has always been ignored and has been working under the shadows of law or social work or social policy and research or public policy or sociology, for instance. And I feel criminology deserves the kind of attention that now it's getting abroad, but not in non-Western countries like India or South Asia in general. So thank you so much for inviting me, and I'm really excited to see a very generous audience as well. And I'm really thankful to all of you for coming today to attend this session, because I feel even if some of you today are inspired by the talk and want to pursue criminology, I think half of my battle for this talk today is done and achieved. So thank you so much again. So I'll share my screen now and let me know if you're able to see. Are you able to see? Just give me a thumbs up if you are. I hope you're all able to see my screen. I've started the screen sharing now. So yeah, as I was saying, that today my presentation is on careers in criminology, something that I have been wanting to do for a while now. Of all the talks that I've delivered up until today, I think this is one of the most interesting and some of the most important talks that I've delivered, because I feel that criminology needs to be encouraged as a discipline, and more people need to pursue this field as one of their academic areas or professional careers. So I hope that you can take away from this presentation. So whenever somebody asks me what is my career and what I do, and I say I'm a criminologist, people have a lot of questions and people have a lot of doubts on what I really do. People don't understand what criminology really is and what it entails. People often confuse it with sociology, law. Sometimes people think that I'm a forensic investigator or a CID or a detective or work with CBI. So among all the audience today, I want to ask you guys, what do you think a criminologist does? So my next slide is, I'm a criminologist. So I want to ask you guys, what do you think I do as being a criminologist? So the options that you have, please type your responses in the chat box and I can see them. I help in solving crimes. So I'm a part of the CID, CBI. I'm a detective or work as an FBI agent. B, I do something in relation to law. So I work with lawyers, I attend court hearings, and something to do with law, basically. C is I read criminal mind and behavior. So basically I talk to criminals and then I read their mind, I observe their behavior, and that's what my job really entails. Or is it completely something else? So, okay. I'm having some of the responses. Okay, so most of the responses that I can see, I can give you a few more seconds if you want. Yeah, all the above can be an option, totally. Okay. Okay, great. So I can see that a lot of you have actually typed C as one of the responses, that I read criminal mind and behavior. And some of them have said that, everything except D. So I help in solving crimes, I do something in relation to law, and I read criminal mind and behavior. So for all of you who don't really know what I really do, I do something in relation to all of these things, but not really all of these things. So which means I'm not an FBI agent, I'm not a detective, a CID or a CBI. I do not exactly do something in relation to law because lawyers are very well versed and academically profound to perform their jobs, and criminologists don't need to enter that area. I do not read criminal mind and behavior because, again, that's a part of criminal psychology, and psychologists do that and not really criminologists. So what do criminology really entail? Then what is really criminology? So before I say what it is, let me break some of the myths that are surrounding criminology. So criminology has been synonymously used with subjects such as forensic science, criminalistic, scientific crime detection. So people who think I work with the CBI or CID, actually, I do not do that because forensic science and scientific crime detectives do that job. So there's a big difference between what a criminologist does and what a forensic investigator does. A forensic investigator basically collects documents, preserves, and examines the physical evidence on the crime scene. Criminologists don't do that. So we do not enter the crime scene, and we do not observe the forensic, and we do not collect physical evidence of the crime, and we don't collect blood samples and fingerprints or DNA testing and blood and tissue spatter, because all of these things are done by actually a scientific crime detective, which is a forensic investigator. Criminalistics is a very, very interesting field that has now come up within forensic science. So it's actually a subdiscipline of forensic science where people learn how to gather such kind of evidence. And to do such a degree and to be very well versed with the kind of profession of collecting evidence, you require a degree in natural science. So basically, people who are actually working as forensic investigators go on to do a scientific degree. So they do a BSc in science, or they do a BSc in physics, biology, or chemistry, or sometimes in forensic science particularly. And that is how they collect evidence, and that is how they know how to test samples. A criminologist, on the other hand, does not do that. Many people think that I do criminal law. Now, criminal law is actually a substream within law. So people who study law specialize in criminal law. And criminal law is basically a study of law that constitutes what is crime. So whether you are reading section 370, section 376, 302, all of these things criminologists do not study, lawyers study. So criminal law is something that comes within the ambit of law and not necessarily criminology. But it is very important to understand that both of these streams are very well related to each other. So if you have a proficiency in law, if you have a prior knowledge of law, I think it's beneficial in criminology, but it's not exactly what a criminologist does. Third, criminal psychology. A lot of times people actually ask me that you interact with prisoners and you do a lot of prison research, so you must be knowing what kind of behavior do they have and why do they commit crime, what goes on inside their mind. I'm not a criminal psychologist. And basically, I'm a criminologist. And so when I talk to prisoners, I don't really understand what's going on in their mind. So I don't read their mind. I don't go behind what is their psychology, what is their behavior, thoughts, or emotions, whether they have mental health issues, or whether they are predisposed to a certain kind of criminal tendency. That is not the kind of job that I do as a criminologist, because that is the work and that's specialized to criminal psychologists. Now, this is again a very interrelated field to criminology, because people who pursue criminal psychology sometimes often end up doing a PhD in criminology. Now, I know a lot of my colleagues who have been trained in psychology. I myself have been trained in psychology in my bachelor's, and then I went on to do criminology as a specialization. That doesn't necessarily mean that I'm a criminal psychologist, because I really do not look at their behaviors and I really do not understand the minds and what goes on in their psychological bent of mind when they commit a crime. Because if you want to pursue that kind of an area of research, you really need to pursue criminal psychology, which is another stream and discipline that people do within psychology. So if you pursue bachelor's in psychology, then a master's in psychology, and then a PhD in psychology, perhaps you could take one of your research areas as criminal psychology. And then you might understand what are the mental health issues that prisoners are facing today, or what are the mental health issues that victims face when a violent act happens to them. So such kind of things do not enter the realm of criminology per se. So many of you must be wondering that I've told everything that criminology is not, but what is then criminology? So criminology is a study of crime and delinquent behavior, including causation, correction, prevention, and impact on society. So what we really study is crime in the context of society. So what we try to study in a layman term is that why does crime occur? In what circumstances, in what socio-economic, religious, cultural circumstances does crime occur? And how can we prevent such a crime to be occurring in future? How does correctional institutions treat such offenders and treat victims of crime? What are the institutional responses to crime? So how do criminal justice agency respond to people who have offended or people who are victims of crime? So suppose I have committed a heinous crime such as murder. When I enter a court, how does the magistrate treat me? How does a police personnel treat me? What happens when I go in a police station? So the aftermath of a crime in the context of society and in the context of institutions that the offenders are dealing with is something that criminologists study. The nature, character, and conditions of custodial institutions. So a lot of research nowadays has been going on what are the conditions of police station, on custodial torture. So you must have heard a lot of news stories about people ended up being murdered in police stations, or committing suicides in prisons, or getting tortured under police protection or in prisons as well. So all of this also comes under the ambit of criminology. So this is also something that criminologists study, because this is also in context of society and not necessarily criminal law, because the law can say one thing, but criminologists study that this is what law says, but how is it implementation going on in the society? How is it implemented in real life? In reality, what happens? So there's something called as rule of law, but it's something called as implementation. And what is the effect of that implementation on the offender and the victim both? And what happens to the society? So when the offender gets released from prison, what is the impact that the offense is having on the offender? So there's one thing that an offender commits crime, but there's another thing that he gets released in the society. How does the society react to crime? How does the society react to that offender? Is something that criminologists study, and something that I'm also very much interested in. So these are all the things that criminologists study. A lot of research has also gone into violence, into organized forms of criminality, which means human trafficking, smuggling, drug peddling, and all of that also falls within the ambit of criminology. So basically anything and everything that's connected to crime, delinquent behavior, and society's response to crime is something that criminology entails. So what is the eligibility criteria of pursuing such a subject? Many people would think that if you want to pursue criminology, you must be trained in criminology as a discipline in your bachelor's or in your master's, but that is not a necessity at all. So if you are in your 12th standard and you're entering, or you're looking for prospects for your bachelor's, there are some universities which offer a bachelor's in criminology, though they are not very renowned and they're not very many in India. So which is also a reason why I pursued psychology. Also because I didn't know that time that I was interested in criminology. Um, and so anybody who has an interest in criminology, in crime, in criminal behavior, in delinquent behavior, and what is society's response to crime, can pursue criminology in any of their phases in career. So whether it's bachelor's, whether it's master's, or whether it's PhD, you can pursue criminology at any point of your academic timeline. So there's no straight-jacketed career path to pursuing criminology as a discipline. So if you've studied bachelor's in public policy, if you've studied bachelor's in social work, even in sciences, so even if you've done your engineering degree, but you're still interested in understanding how crime happens and what do criminals really think, why do they commit crime, you can still pursue a master's in criminology. If you have a master's in psychology and you have a master's in social work, social policy, in anthropology, in sociology, you can still pursue a PhD in criminology because you still have somewhat specialized knowledge about the subject, because criminology constitutes is not a discipline that came about in itself. It's a discipline that's an offshoot of various other disciplines. So if you're trained in any other discipline which is related or remotely related to criminology, whether it's sociology, political science, geography, economics, social work, social policy, psychology, psychiatry, you can still pursue criminology in any of your stages. So this is my career timeline. As you can see, in 2011, like very rightly mentioned by Saurabeswar, I completed my BA in psychology honors from Punjab University. In 2012, I went to Asian College of Journalism because at that point of time, I was very much interested in pursuing a degree in journalism. And I wanted to be a journalist because I wanted to do something meaningful. I wanted to reach out to a larger target audience, and I wanted to have an impact. So with that vague idea in mind, I entered journalism. I passed out my degree in journalism the same year, and I started working as a sub-editor in Hindustan Times. But only working there for just 1 year, I realized that journalism is not my cup of tea. And because I was on the crime desk at that point of time, I was hearing a lot of crime stories coming to my desk, and I was editing them. So in that process of editing, I kind of like developed an interest in criminology. And I thought that why do people really end up committing a crime? Because a lot of stories were coming from police stations, a lot of custodial torture was happening. And at that point of time, if you remember, in 2012, the Nirbhaya gang rape happened. And a lot of the reporters in Hindustan Times were covering that incident. And somewhat in the media coverage of that crime, I realized that how unethical media can be. And that kind of diminished my interest in media. And I started pursuing, and I thought that I would pursue a proper degree in social work and criminology. In 2013, I completed my MA Social Work in Criminology and Justice from Tata Institute of Social Sciences. The experience was wonderful because I got an opportunity to actually work in the field of criminology in correctional settings. So I was placed in Thane prison for over a year, where I worked on the issue of legal aid for prisoners. So I used to enter the prison, interview prisoners, and basically fetch them lawyers, people who didn't have lawyers to represent their case. I would actually work with the legal aid department and would get them lawyers in prison. That kind of ensured my interest in the field of prison research. And so as a part of my master's dissertation, I interviewed women in Punjab prisons on how do they contemplate their life outside prison. And from there on, my journey with correctional settings just began. And I just and then there was no going back. In 2016, 17, I worked as an associate in justice and care, where I worked with an anti-human trafficking organization in rescuing children from child labor, domestic servitude, bride trafficking, sexual exploitation. I worked with a lot of children of sexual abuse and tried to provide aftercare support to them. So right from education, skill development, employment, to taking care of their families, providing them with counseling help, accompanying them to courts and providing them with all kinds of physical, mental, and social support. was kind of my role in the organization. But then I was again kind of like attracted towards academia, and I thought that I should do my MPhil in criminological research. Cambridge being one of the most renowned universities offering such a program, I applied there, fortunately got admitted, and went on to do my MPhil in criminological research with the Manuel Lopez Scholarship. Now, this scholarship is really interesting because it offers people from developing countries a chance to pursue criminology. And I was lucky enough to have that kind of a scholarship with me when I went on to do my MPhil. After doing my MPhil, I took an year gap and I actually became the Chief Minister Fellow with the Delhi government. So there's a fellowship of the Delhi government that I pursued. And it was a really, really interesting experience because then I got to understand the mechanisms of state actors, what goes behind in making a policy. And because I was stationed with the Delhi Commission for Women, I actually worked with a lot of like women survivors of domestic violence, of acid attack, of sexual exploitation, human trafficking, and actually got to work on policies that are related to such fields. And my degree in criminology kind of helped me with that critical bent of mind to understand policies, to understand what goes behind making these policies, and to basically, because I had already worked in both correctional settings and I had also worked with victims, so I knew what exactly is needed in a policy, what exactly do survivors of such offenses need, and what goes on, in the minds of the survivor or a, victim of sexual abuse. And that really helped me in my stint as a fellow in the Delhi government. After that, I was lucky enough to get a prestigious Gates Cambridge scholarship, which is a full-fledged scholarship for a PhD degree offered by the Gates Trust. And currently, I'm doing a PhD in criminology at the University of Cambridge. My PhD research currently aims at exploring women's imprisonment and post-imprisonment experiences through the lens of their heterosexual intimate relationships. So in a layman term, what I do is I go in prison, I interview women about their intimate relationships with male prisoners, with male prison guards, and prospective men outside. So I do not interview them about their relationships with their husbands, but the new relationships that they have formed after coming to prison. And this is something that I explored during my years of fieldwork in prisons. And I observed that how women, even inside prison, exercise agency in choosing their own marital partners. And even in such despair and in such sadness, they manage to survive, and by through these intimate relationships that they form. So my current PhD research focus on the kind of networks that they rely on to find such partners and the interesting ways that they connect with these relationships. So many times women have actually shared their love letters with me that they exchange with male prisoners. The kind of experiences that they have had in court lockups where they have managed to form these relationships with male prisoners. Because a lot of people ask me that how can women make relationships within prison, and that's the interesting question that my PhD addresses, that what kind of illegal yet interesting ways that women resort to within confinement to find these relationships that ultimately become their sole support systems when everything else breaks down. So a lot of women, when they go inside prison, they don't have family support systems. A lot of time their husbands leave them, their children leave them, and then in such extenuating circumstances they rely on these alternate social networks and these relationships with male prisoners. So my research is an actually ethnographic research, and it involves a lot of in-depth qualitative interviews with over 150 women offenders. I've already managed to interview over 100 women offenders across Punjab and Rajasthan women prisons. So a lot of my fieldwork actually goes in going inside prisons, interviewing women at length, and on an average, I spend across 6 to 7 hours in prison daily, interacting with prison staff, interacting with prison inmates. And it's not easy because it's very, very challenging, because it's very difficult for women to open up about their life histories and about their criminal life histories with me, and why did they end up in prison, and about their love stories inside prison, which I'm trying to explore. And so a lot of times, to get them to open up to me and to build that kind of rapport, I do English speaking classes with them. I organize a lot of gender sensitization workshops with them, a lot of art workshops. So I employ a variety of different techniques with women to get them to open up about their life stories, because I feel that it's a selfish exercise if I just sit there and interview them without giving them anything in return. So these days I've been organizing a series of workshops inside prisons, and it's been a phenomenal experience, and something that I think needs to be explored not only by me as a researcher, but by many professional people in the field of criminology as well. And a lot of voluntary initiatives I've been involved in. I have been a founder and convener of Cambridge Decolonizing Criminology Network, which is a very interesting network. So people who do not know about criminology would not understand the technique and the technical skills that come with the Decolonizing Criminology Initiative. So just to explain it simply, it's basically criminology has been a very Western dominated discipline. So if you look at its development, if you look at its stance even today, it's dominated by Western scholarship. It was founded by Western scholars and European scholars, and it still remains a very Eurocentric discipline. So a lot of research within criminology comes from US, UK, or Europe. And this lack of criminological scholarship, say from India, Nepal, Pakistan, Bhutan, Bangladesh, Latin America, Africa, or even Middle East. So the Cambridge Decolonizing Criminology Network aims to boost scholarship from these countries, from countries of the global south. So we try to invite speakers, invite guests from all these various countries where criminological scholarship has been dominantly lacking. And we encourage people to discuss how we can encourage more scholarship from these areas, about how we can put colonialism as a center of contemporary criminological debate, because a lot of times we forget that people or countries who've been colonized, how has criminology developed in those countries, because it's been largely influenced by UK scholarship. So the Cambridge Decolonizing Criminology Network tries to delve into those kind of areas. I also do a lot of raising funds. So in the middle of the second wave, I was kind of using public platforms and crowdsourcing platforms to raise funds for Punjab Prison Department to raise money for COVID kits that got distributed ultimately to correctional staff and prisoners alike. I also ran a 4-week-long counseling initiative with COVID positive patients across 2 prisons, that is Ludhiana and Malerkotla, where we were a team of 9 volunteers who were professionally trained in counseling. And we didn't go inside the prisons, but we were conducting these counseling sessions through video conferencing inside COVID special jails with COVID positive patients. And again, it was a very, very, very eye-opening experience to understand how prisoners are feeling amidst the second wave within prison and being detected COVID positive. So there are multiple layers, and it was extremely energizing as well, because then you feel that within confinement as well, how prisoners are being treated, how COVID positive prisoners are being treated, how they're being stigmatized by the prison staff, by the prison department, and how much is needed within this field, and how much scope there is in general. So why pursue criminology? So I've told you a lot about technical things about what I do and what criminology really entails. But why should you pursue criminology? Why should anyone pursue criminology? Firstly, I think it gives you a huge opportunity to work in challenging settings with social actors and institutions dealing with crime, law, and justice. So with years of working in this field now, I realized that I would never have chosen any other alternate field, because it's such a challenging setting. It challenges you in the most oddest, unique, and exciting of ways, because you're interacting with criminal enforcement agencies, like law enforcement agencies. You're constantly interacting with courts, with police stations, with police people, with magistrates, with the prison staff. And all of this, while seems challenging, is so important because in today's time, when we know that a lot of minorities, a lot of people, a lot of vulnerable communities end up inside prisons, end up inside custodial homes, end up inside these care homes, a lot of destitute people as well. So the the role of criminologists becomes all the more important because we are the only ones who are accessing these systems. We are the only ones who get the opportunity to go inside these systems to make change happen in reality. And I think that if there are more criminologists and if there are more people working in the field of criminology, there'll be more people entering the field. There are more people interacting with the system. There's a lot of change that can happen. A lot of people who do not deserve to be in these institutions can actually come out of this and can get rehabilitated within society. So I feel there's a lot more that can be done in this field, and there are a lot more people needed in this field, a lot more people from different backgrounds, different educational backgrounds, who can offer expertise and who can reform the criminal justice system. I also feel that criminology enhances your analytical and critical thinking abilities. Um, Leaving aside any other social science discipline, I'm not a good commentator on that, but I feel as a criminologist, my analytical and critical thinking abilities are much more sharper because I constantly have to keep my mind active. I constantly have to apply that critical bend of mind whenever I'm dealing with state actors, with agencies, and with people who are in custodial institutions like prisons or care homes or police stations or courts, because all the time you have to keep your radar on. Like there's nothing else that you can do inside a prison. There's so much going on. Like when you enter a prison, you're not only interviewing a prisoner, you're also observing what goes around that, right? So a lot of times when I interview a prisoner, there's the prison staff, there's a presence of a prison staff member always. And there's always like comments coming from that side. There's always something going on here where, there are people going in and out. There are people who are also listening to those stories. There are people who are commenting on the prison administration. There are illegal things happening. So you also kind of witness corruption inside these institutions. And there's always like, you cannot keep your mind off these things. And so suddenly you become you develop these analytical and critical thinking abilities that are really, really required in the profession as well. Like I've already mentioned, ability to impact and improve lives of vulnerable communities and population. Criminology has that effect. I really urge people to join this field because there are very few people, even within the broader realm of social work, who work within settings like criminology because it's really challenging. Firstly, you do not get access. Nobody will give you access in a prison, right? You cannot just walk up outside the prison and say, today I just want to interview a prisoner, or I just want to see what a prison feels like, right? Because access is so difficult. Many people do not pursue this field because you cannot get access to the population you're trying to study. You need connections to the prison administration. You need connections to the academic staff. You need to open your own organization, or you need to work with NGOs that have that kind of access. So that kind of limits people who pursue criminology. Even people who are studying human trafficking, child sexual exploitation, sex slavery, and all other, and the victim side of the criminal justice system. I feel many times people really get affected by hearing stories of sexual violence, of such heinous crimes, that they eventually just feel that they want to leave the field, or they eventually do not pursue this field in terms of like directly connecting with the target audience, but they kind of go in research, or they kind of go in public policy, because that still means that you're not interacting with the audience directly. And I feel because you need such resilience and mental strength to work in a field like criminology, many people just opt out of it. And I feel that's a shame, because if nobody is actually going on the field and interviewing target audiences like these, how will change happen? So I really urge some of you, or all of you today, who wants to make change happen and who wants to reform the criminal justice system, to actually pursue criminology, because it will give you such a diverse viewpoint which no other field can ever give you. skills required to be a criminologist. You really need specialized knowledge of the subject area. So it's not like I go into the field and I don't know what happens in the public policy domain. I need to know my policies. I need to know the jail manual. I need to know the international conventions, constitution, and legal provisions. I need to know what 302 is. So agar koi mujhe bol raha hai that he's in for murder, ki main 302 mein hu, I need to know what 302 means, right? I cannot be asking the prisoner every time, acha 302 kya hota hai? So you need specialized knowledge. So when I say law and criminology is interrelated, that's because you cannot separate law from criminology, and you cannot separate criminology from law. Because when you enter the field and people talk about their offenses, you need some knowledge of law. And that comes while you're working on the field. You really do not need a degree in law. You don't need an LLB. And empathy and sensitivity towards target population. I feel this is the most important skill that a criminologist needs. So when I enter the field, I cannot be non-empathetic and I cannot be insensitive towards my target population. Whether I'm interacting with human trafficking survivors, whether I'm interacting with prisoners, whether I'm interacting with the prison staff, I cannot be insensitive. Sometimes you just have to open your mind. You need to reflect on your own personal biases, because a lot of time your personal biases come in the way. For instance, the other day I was interacting with a prisoner who was convicted for gang rape. Now, being a woman, being staunchly against offenses like rape or sexual offenses in general, if you're interacting with a prisoner and you have those personal biases in mind, you would not be able to interact with him, because you will not be able to see what goes on in his life. You'll not be able to see the social context in which that crime is being committed. And that is what a criminologist study. You don't really understand why he committed gang rape, but in what context, in what socioeconomic contexts was that crime committed in the first place? What was his childhood history? What was his mental health issue? What was his childhood like? What was his parents doing? And all of these things you need to take into consideration when you're interacting with an offender. And so sometimes you really need to be non-judgmental, and you have to have extreme sensitivity towards people you are interacting with. So a lot of times when a lot of my colleagues have shared that when they have interacted with sexual abuse survivors, because they have been sexual abuse victims themselves at some point of time, because almost 1/3 of all women have been sexually abused at some point in their life. It's very difficult to separate those feelings when you're interacting with a sexual abuse survivors, because it's very, very natural that those feelings kind of like overpower your emotions, and then you're not able to perform your job well. But these are some of the things that you learn when you start pursuing this field, when you start really interacting with actors in the field. So it comes with experience, it comes with understanding the various social contexts, it comes with understanding criminological theories that go behind this field. So I really feel that those are the skills that are required to be a criminologist. I think passion is something that will really drive you to stay in this field for a long term, because that's what has helped me towards making a difference in the lives of people. There are times when I come back home, I'm really, really tired, exhausted by hearing all of those stories. Sometimes you're emotionally exhausted as well. There are times when, I go out of the prison, I cry, and then I come back again and interview people, because a lot of their stories resonate with yours as well. A lot of those childhood traumas remind you of things of your past, or remind you of, general social crimes and, the general social status of our society. But that's how this field is. It challenges you in the most exhaustive of ways. And then mental agility comes into play, and resilience comes into play. And then, that is the drive that actually helps you within this field. So career options. A lot of people ask me, so what? You're doing all this brilliant research in prisons and, interacting with prisoners. Where will this take you? So these are some of the options that I can avail, or anybody of you who pursues criminology can avail. The first is academic research, policy research, or professorship. So some of my colleagues and some of people I know who are pursuing criminology, or who have done exemplary research in the field outside and in India, pursue policy research. So a lot of them are working as policy consultants with very famous organizations, with very famous human rights organizations, Amnesty International, CHRI, to name a few. There's UNHRC, there's UNODC, there's UN Women, a lot of gender-based organizations. Many of them have actually taken the academic route, have done a PhD, then a postdoctorate, and then eventually became an assistant professor, then a professor. A lot of them are still working with community-based organizations, NGOs, working on legal aid, rehabilitation of victims of trafficking, sexual exploitation, prison reforms, rehabilitation of prisoners and families. I myself, being a criminologist, I'm now in the process of opening my own organization that works on rehabilitation of prisoners and their families. So a lot of career opportunities. If you are an entrepreneur, you can open your own organization. If you want to work with an organization, that's an option. If you want to go into academia, publish papers, publish research, that's an option. I know criminologists who have gone to journalism and have now been writing brilliant pieces on criminal justice policies, on prisons, on how custodial torture, on police torture, on terrorism, on war against children, on children's of prisoners. So there's so many other avenues that you can go to. There's a lot of juvenile justice based organizations as well, which works on juvenile justice, works on observation homes. So on one hand, there's prisons, which houses adult prisoners, and then there's observation homes, which houses juveniles in prisons. So a lot of people have actually gone to those organizations. There are child rights based organizations as well, Save the Children, and a lot more. There's CRY and everything. So basically, everything is open for a criminologist, because once you are trained as a criminologist, you have those critical thinking abilities and that bent of mind to look at a societal view, to look at a broader view of crime. I think it really puts you on an edge as compared to other applicants. So when I go for an interview, so when I was interviewing for my Chief Minister Delhi Fellowship, I remember there were like so many hundreds and thousands of applicants, and there were only 24 people that were selected for that fellowship. And me being a criminologist really added value to my interview, because the things that I could say about crime, the things that I could say about how we should reform the criminal justice system, or how prisons should operate, or how people should be treated, or how victims should be treated by institutions, because there's a lot of stigma around victims as well. So I think that really helped me in the interview process. So wherever you go, being a criminologist would always put you in a better position as compared to other applicants. Now, these are some of the fields that I feel that people who specialize in criminology can take. So if you can look at the above three options, they are the sub-disciplines of criminology. So a lot of people do not say that they're just a criminologist. Sometimes people say they are a neurocriminologist, or they pursue penology. Now, penology also means a study of prisons, the study of penal institutions. So which includes prisons, which includes courts, which includes police stations. Anything to do with punishment and crime is what penology deals with. Neurocriminology. This is a very, very exciting upcoming field. Anybody who's interested in biology and criminology, this is the best combination. So a lot of people who pursue sciences in their bachelor's and master's as well go on to do neurocriminology, because they link brain mapping to how a person is predisposed to crime. So they basically do all kind of brain mapping techniques to establish how certain biological traits or certain functioning in the brain can actually make you more violent as compared to other people. So that is a very, very exciting field that people can pursue. Then there's victimology. Victimology is basically a study of victims of crime and how victims and offenders are related. How does agencies and institutions basically respond to victims of crime? And this is a very, very upcoming field. Victimology is also struggling because it also wants to dissociate itself from criminology and become a separate field of its own, because it has a lot of scope. And people who do not necessarily want to study offenders can actually study victimology and can pursue that specialization once they enter criminology. So all of these things you can study within criminology. And once you've done with your master's in criminology, in your PhD, or in your further specialization, you can pursue any of these streams. Below are the theoretical approaches. So when I say theoretical approaches of criminology, criminology comes from various standpoints. I know many criminologists that are advocates of death penalty and many criminologists that are absolutely against death penalty. Now, both are criminologists. So there's no one standpoint of criminology that people take. People who are for victims often are for death penalty and are advocates for death penalty. People who do not pursue victimology and who pursue offender rights are often against death penalty. So there's no one theoretical approach that criminology has. And you can see critical criminology is one of the most important and upcoming fields of criminology again, because it not only deals with why crime happens, but critical criminology basically applies a very critical lens to how crime basically happens, because criminal justice agencies are also not able to reform criminals in the right way. So it's basically takes a very critical lens to criminal justice institutions, to prisons, to courts, and how do they operate and treat offenders. And ultimately, because they are not able to rehabilitate them in the society, is why they keep reoffending. So critical criminology is again a very upcoming field. Southern criminology is very close to decolonizing criminology. Like I said, a lot of criminological research coming from the West. Southern criminology is one stream that advocates for research coming from the global South. So it encourages a lot of scholarship from South Asian countries, from Australia, from Latin America, from Africa, Middle East, because it wants criminological scholarship from that end. And it says that maybe it's time that criminology should be more diverse and maybe globally more inclusive as it is today. Cultural criminology, again, very, very interesting, something very close to what I do. Basically, it places crime in a very cultural context. So even if you see crimes in India today, so I've been interviewing a lot of women offenders in Rajasthan, and I observe that a lot of women commit crime because they have been victims of crime as well in the past. So a lot of women have actually been victims of domestic violence, and after suffering years of abuse, they end up murdering their husband. Now, there's a thin overlap between victim and offender. When does a victim become an offender, and when does an offender become a victim? Many people would say because she was a victim of domestic violence, that led to her committing a crime. In a cultural context like India, which is really patriarchal and which puts women in a very submissive position and and puts man in a very dominant position, I feel that a lot of crimes committed by women happens because of that very reason, because a lot of community pressure that you can't divorce your husband, that you cannot leave your husband, that you have to endure the marital abuse for as long as you can. And that kind of forces women to commit crime in the first place. So committing crime like dowry, committing crime like female infanticide, female feticide, it all comes from a very cultural and societal context, and cultural criminology deals with that. Feminist criminology again applies a very gender lens to criminology. It deals with everything women. So women in criminal justice system, women who are victims of crime, why do women commit crime? So feminist criminology is also a very, very upcoming field. It has been there since long. Since feminism came into play, feminist criminology also took the standpoint of feminism and developed a strand of its own. Green criminology is interesting because it looks at environmental crimes. Queer criminology is something that looks at LGBTQ issues. How does the LGBTQ people or population being treated by the criminal justice system is something which is now being highlighted, something which is now coming up. And I think it's really important because there's a lot of transgender population as well in prisons, which has largely been invisible, largely been ignored, even within prison research. So I feel that this is again an upcoming field. Despite me, going on and on about how great criminology is as a discipline and how we should all pursue it, how it has the ability to impact a larger, wider audience, what is the current challenge for criminology? Why can't we pursue criminology? Like, why criminology is still not recognized? Why do we still have only like few courses of criminology? There's no masters in criminology as such, and nobody has ever heard about criminology until they are within the social science discipline. So I think one of the major challenges is it's a very relatively new discipline. Like I said, it was an offshoot of sociology developed in the late 18th century. So sociology developed, anthropology developed, psychology developed, and through all these disciplines, finally criminology developed. Criminology was not recognized as a discipline for as long as I can remember. So earlier criminologists were all sociologists in the first place. And very later in the stage of sociology was criminology recognized as a separate discipline. So criminology has struggled and is still struggling to find its place within the social science discipline as well. It's not recognized as a separate discipline at all. So even if you see abroad, even at University of Cambridge, even at University of Oxford, it still falls under the faculty of law. Many people cannot understand that law and criminology are completely different disciplines and need different kind of resources and different kind of mindsets. Law is a very, very technical discipline where you pursue law, and there's a lot of like constitution and a lot of like facts. It's based on facts and figures, whereas criminology deals with the sociological aspect of criminalization and criminal aspect. So I think that kind of a difference is missing when it comes to a layman understanding why criminology should be recognized as a separate discipline. And I feel that there is very, very little universities, even abroad, who recognize this difference. Even in TIS, for instance, criminology is not separate. It falls within the bracket of social work, whereas psychology is separate. So psychology, MA in psychology, MA in counseling psychology, MA in clinical psychology is separate than social work. But within social work, there's criminology. So whereas I feel that it's time that MA in criminology should be offered as a course separate than MA in social work. Still in nascent stages in many developing countries, like I said, in the global south, in South Asian countries, criminology is unheard of, something which still runs behind the shadows of other disciplines. So I think this is the main challenge as to why it's still not recognized. It's not a straight jacketed career path, not considered as lucrative, appropriate. For a long time, I had to convince my family members as well as to why I'm pursuing this field. People still feel, and even when I interact with government agency, they often ask me कि आप तो मतलब लड़की हो, लड़की होकर आप जेलों में जाते हो, आप पे तो बहुत बुरा असर होता होगा. Such a layman understanding of criminology is what is still existent in India. So in an Indian context, for a woman to pursue a discipline like criminology is still a big taboo, because as a woman, you can't be interviewing offenders of gang rape. You can't be interviewing men in prison, right? And which is why I have had a lot of challenges in having access in male prisons, and which is why my PhD research also focuses on women, because partly because it's needed, partly because access is really difficult. These are some of the criminology courses that are offered in India. So anybody who wants to pursue so I don't know what is the range of audience. People want to pursue a bachelor's or a master's, but bachelor's programs are very, very few and they're not very renowned. And I wouldn't recommend doing a bachelor's in criminology straight away, because I feel a bachelor's in any other social discipline or a general bachelor's in arts will give you more career option in case you do not want to pursue criminology in future, and it will not limit your career path. So do a general bachelor's and a major in psychology or other fields, and then pursue a master's in criminology, because then you will have a more mindset to pursue criminology like that. But if you're still sure, go ahead and pursue a bachelor's. Though I don't know many bachelor courses, I'm so sorry. Studying abroad. So Catalyst asked me to like put some light on how do we pursue criminology abroad. It's really challenging because, as I said, even outside India, it's not recognized as a discipline on its own. I am the first criminologist or a first person who is studying criminology on a Gates scholarship and doing a PhD at Cambridge. So imagine how many few people do criminology from India abroad. So I'm the only PhD student ever from India in criminology. So studying abroad has its own challenges. You need very good academic records if you need to be in a good university. It's very important you explore your interests. So if for a PhD or for a master's level degree, you need to be very, very sure as to what really you want to pursue. If you want to do prison research, there are universities which are very good in prison research. If you want to do victimology, violence research, there are universities which specialize in that. So you need to really make a mind of what your interest area is and then follow that. You need excellent academic references. So make sure that once you are in the field, you're performing well, you make good connects with your professors, because that really helps you in your applications. Work experience. This is very, very important. What puts me at an edge as compared to other applicants, and what puts me on a better standpoint, is because I have relevant work experience in the past. I have worked in prisons for as long as I can remember. I have worked in the human trafficking field as well, which means that I have an understanding of the victims' side as well. And this really puts me on a better position as compared to other applicants when it comes to applying abroad. Because what they see is, how much voluntary experience do you have? How much work experience do you have? How much field knowledge do you have? You can't just like go into a master's in criminology or an MPhil in criminology just because you've done a bachelor's in criminology. No, I would really recommend, if you want to study abroad, please work in the field for considerable years, get an understanding of the field, and then pursue a course abroad, because then you will make the most out of it and they would also admit you with the scholarship. So I guess I'm done. I would just encourage you all to pursue this field. I know it's been a little technical because criminology is very complicated in its discipline, and I really wanted to give you a gist of everything. So questions are welcome, and thank you so much for listening.
Wow. I feel, of course, we are absolutely open to questions, Kanupriya. And a very interesting thing that strikes my mind, as you have been able to share some pretty deep insights. I hope the other participants would also be agreeing with me. Since one point, Kanupriya, which comes by, and we are opening the question and answer questions to the audience, that feel free to ask questions. One interesting thing which comes to my mind, and I hope it also strikes the others too, is that, Kanupriya, we keep on talking of during our counseling sessions at Catalyst about so many opportunities which are getting oversaturated in our country. Like, there are like people who are taking that type of a course, or then finally working in that specific manner, and that has multiplied to such a big extent that we are now talking of, say, those programs getting oversaturated. On the other hand, criminology, as per your perspective, is still such a huge untapped zone. We discovered that you are the first Gates scholar to pursue a program. So again, congratulations to that on one note, but also it on the other hand, it also intrigues us to know from your end the level of demand which, Kanupriya, you feel the society is now opening up to criminologists. What would you like to add to an already very insightful session that you just concluded with us?
So if I understand your question correctly, it hovers around what does society demand from a criminologist? Is that right?
Yes.
So like I've mentioned some of it in my presentation as well. In India today, the criminal justice system is in complete shatters, where we can see that people from vulnerable communities, Adivasis, Dalits, denotified tribes, people from minorities, people who do not have the socioeconomic resources, they are the people who end up in conflict with the criminal justice system. They are the people who end up in conflict with law. On the victim side as well, I feel that people who do not have the resources to fight their case, people who do not have the socioeconomic power to actually get into the police station and, leave freely without trauma. I think those are the people who end up within the criminal justice system. And then our responsibility as a criminologist increases manifold, because there our role comes into picture. I think this also started social work in criminology with the same intent, because it thought that there's a need for social workers within criminal justice settings to address these issues, to help rehabilitate such population, to help people, to help such people access resources like legal aid. Because I have in my years of experience understood that once one person ends up in conflict with law, it's not just the person. The secondary prisonization of the family happens with that person. So the family suffers, and the stigma of being incarcerated doesn't leave until the end of your life. So how do we deal with that as a society, which puts so much pressure on offenders, which stigmatizes offenders even after they have completed 14 years of imprisonment? That society needs a criminologist, because they need to understand that these people deserve to be rehabilitated into the society. These people deserve to re-enter the society, because they are capable of reform. And not every person who commits a crime is an offender. There's this very interesting quote that I read in one of the prisons that I visited. Ki paap se घृणा karo, papi se nahi, which is a very profound quote, but how many people believe in it? Because it's very difficult to remove the crime from the individual and to see the individual as it is. And as a criminologist, we have the capacity to do that. So if there are more criminologists in the country and society has more criminologists, I feel the society would also understand. Criminologists would make the society understand, or it would help make this awareness that crime doesn't happen by an individual. It's the whole society to be blamed. It's our cultural expectations, it's our communal roots to be blamed, because at the end the individual is a part of the society and it has to return back to its society. So it's the society who has to understand that every person is capable of reform. And I just hope that one day happens that we don't need social workers and criminologists, but in today's situation, the only way that such a gap could be bridged is by a criminologist. If I write about these things, if I make people aware about these things, I think the society would be made aware that they should contribute more towards this reform.
Right. Thank you so much, Kanupriya. That truly sums up the essence of the demand for criminologists in our society. We have like last 5 minutes effectively. We didn't really realize that, we spent an hour, it felt like a breeze hearing the stories from Kanupriya. So anyone in the participants, if you would like to use your microphone and ask a question directly to Kanupriya, you're most welcome to do that. So I think Rohit is trying to. Yes, Rohit, go ahead. Rohit, I'm sorry. We're sorry. I think we can't hear you clearly. Can we hear Rohit clearly?
Am I audible?
Yes, you are, Rohit. Go ahead.
Okay, ma'am. Ma'am, you learned like basic theory in your MA in criminology, and when you went into prison or institutions, like was there any difference in the implementation? And do you know any organizations which can give experience to those people who are interested to pursue a career into this field?
Hi, Rohit. Thank you so much for your question. See, theory, That's a very interesting question, actually, because of course, I read basic theoretical approaches of criminology during my master's at TIS as well, and during my MPhil in criminological research at Cambridge as well. A lot of it resonates when you go in the field, because then you can start, joining the dots, and you see that whatever you've read in class is actually true. So, imprisonment, and the theories of prison and why people commit crime, they're often very much related to theory. But of course, the implementation, the challenges on the field are very unique, and something which theory cannot address in its own, because theories are very universal. And I often argue that theories are based on Western contexts. So a lot of theories of criminology or sociology that you hear or study today were based on the context of the 19th century, were based on context of the crime that happened then in Western societies. So in our society in India, the crimes that take place and the nature of crimes that take place, like there's a lot of drug trafficking in Punjab. There's a lot of like dowry crimes in Punjab. You will never hear of dowry crime in the UK or in the US or in Germany, right? So these are all very contextual. So then the theories do fail, because then you start to realize the gap in criminological literature and the gap maybe non-Western researchers should fill by kind of researching on all those areas which are not yet been addressed by Western scholarship. So of course there's a gap between theory and practicality. I think the second question about organizations that you can volunteer with, yes, there's Prayas in Bombay. It also depends on which areas you're located. A lot of organizations are in Mumbai and in Delhi. These are the two, and some are in Kolkata as well and in Bangalore, but not many. Most organizations are in Delhi and Bombay. In Bombay, TIS runs its own project under the department, which is Prayas, and it's a very good organization. It actually goes, people, you can volunteer with that organization. You get a chance to go inside prisons and help them. So basically, they do a lot of work on legal aid. They do a lot of work on rehabilitation, on connecting prisoners with their families. So as you must be knowing that if you enter a prison, and because there's so much stigma with imprisonment, that you often lose your family connections in the middle. So Prayas helps you bridge those family gaps. So it actually helps people reconnect with their families after being inside prison. There's also India Vision Foundation, which is run by Kiran Bedi, which operates in Delhi. I don't know how good or bad it is, but a lot of people volunteer with that organization as well. So they work with prisoners and their families. There is I'm forgetting the name of that organization, and I will get back to you. I will email him the list of all those organizations, but they also work with prisoners and families. They are based out of Delhi. There is, then, they're not organizations, but there are several general organizations that like human rights based organizations, such as CHRI, Commonwealth Human Rights Initiative. And it not only works on prisons, it also works on policing. So they have one of their projects as prisons, and they work extensively on prison research. They work in Haryana, Punjab. They've come up with a lot of policies. They've come up with a lot of project reports on what is missing inside prisons, what are the conditions like. So that's one organization. There's Amnesty International. It's no longer working in India because their funding was kind of stopped, but they work a lot in prisons. Then a lot of organizations working on legal aid. So you would hear a lot of advocates who actually have started opening organizations. They send their lawyers who are in their initial bits of their career to go in prison and represent people for free. Though government also has this facility, but obviously it's not up to the mark, and there are a lot of like loopholes in that. So a lot of organizations working in that front as well. Yeah, I think that's about it. I will give you a list, which is not a lot, but I'll pass on the list to Catalyst, and then maybe you can refer to those organizations and volunteer with them.
Surely. Thank you, Kanupriya. I think that was actually a pretty prolific spectrum of organizations, as well as the interesting point which Kanupriya mentioned at the end, that we do find many pro bono initiatives by law practitioners nowadays, right? And it's actually highlighted even in the newspapers quite often that lawyers and practitioners, they are looking at least say one, if not more than one pro bono support uh, every month in terms of the cases that they are looking at, right? So on that note, since we are like closing in to round about an hour and a half, I would like to sum up the session for everyone's benefit. What we truly enjoyed about the interaction was that after many days, for me also, we spoke about an opportunity which truly has remained undiscovered and untapped, and yet the relevance of it uh, is growing stronger with each passing day. As Kanupriya correctly mentions that the significance of being a criminologist lies in the fact that how well do you create equitable systems in a society with the fairness that actually extends up to even factoring in people who are committing crimes to be a part of the mainstream society as well. And yes, there are exceptions that Kanupriya also mentions, but I feel this is a very fundamental condition in Kanupriya that so many times we keep on referring to crime as being antisocial, quote unquote, and criminals being a part of, again, quote unquote, antisocial activities. And quite naturally, those labelings get embedded in our minds for ages. And as you rightly pointed out, that the reputation with a criminal is not very easy to overcome. Once that they have committed that mistake, quote unquote, right? And criminologists do play that important role, which we have discovered today through Kanupriya's work, through Kanupriya's research work, which is also a very compelling one, we must admit, that how delicately, even within a prison, the human emotions still run so strong and so deep, right? So on that note, we would definitely um, round off today's session. Thank you, participants, once more for joining in, for sharing your questions also. Kanupriya, we can't thank you enough. Also, what we would like to share, as Avinanda points out from our end at Catalyst, is that if you require any further support based on today's discussion and session, like how Rohit asked a question specific to organizations and Kanupriya is willing to support him back, feel free to get in touch with Avinanda on the number provided there. As well as from our end, we will be also sharing a formal feedback form with all of you with the help of Abhinanda once more. And definitely some of the more queries that might come in with the session that you participated, we will try our best to run those queries by Kanupriya so that some of your clarity can be built further. Kanupriya, thank you. I mean, this is like, I know right from the COVID second wave that I discovered you literally, via social media, and then we connected on this very interesting project that you have been highlighting regarding the fundraising. I remember. I truly appreciate from that time onwards, in the last couple of months, that we could organize this interactive session today in presence of such enthusiastic participants. Thank you so much for your time, Kanupriya.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. And I hope some of you will still want to pursue criminology and I haven't demotivated you.
I'm sure not, like, because I see students like, emoting using their Zoom smileys as well as writing in the chat box. I feel that motivation was important. As we move ahead in the year, we do seek, some of these sessions always, which really add that spark. For me also, I am definitely at a much higher level of energy taking back from this session. So thank you everyone for your time. Thank you so much, Kanupriya. Thanks a lot, Abhinanda, for organizing the session.
Absolutely.
Everyone from at Catalyst, and we truly appreciate your participation in this interactive session. Stay well, stay in touch. Remember, this is not something which we are doing only for the sake of knowledge transfer, but in the words of Kanupriya, as outcomes of action that needs to be taken. Many of you wanting to look at criminology as a formal career trajectory ahead, many of you wanting to apply your research work into the spaces of prison reforms, irrespective of the background, which Kanupriya also mentions very interestingly, that you need not always be a criminologist, but you can still support the type of vision that a criminology nurtures and fosters. On that note, from everyone at Catalyst, we bid you goodbye, but we will definitely be back with more insightful sessions, and we will certainly see a scope how we can build on to this conversation starter on criminology and justice as more formal approaches to support your career decisions. Thanks a lot, everyone, once more. Thank you, Kanupriya. You stay well.
Thank
Our
you.
best wishes for your research forward, and we will be in touch with all of you very soon.
Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.